Good morning. Welcome back. We are excited to have a presentation from our friends at NEMIC. We're welcoming Aiden, Lydia, and Al to the stage. Please, let's hear about them and enjoy.
Very good. I'm going to assume, unless somebody tells me otherwise, that everybody can hear me, and good morning all. So I'm going to start this little discussion with some context. And the context is this, that I just had my hip replaced and about a month ago, and I decided to go fishing this morning. And I had a little bit of an incident with between a fish and a fishing rod that has caused me then to have to drive very slowly home. It took a half hour to get from my car to my desk, and the first thing that I reached for was some oxycodone. So I am familiar with this area. I'm going to go straight into a presentation now, and Lydia will come in as we go through. Lydia, do you want to say anything right now as I change over?
Welcome to session. We look forward to a session and Q&A. Aiden, go for it.
Okay, so we're going to go here. All right. So today we're really talking about the pitch development, and the view that we have at NEMIC and also through my career is that the pitch should be a document that is live almost from the beginning of the work that you all are doing, because the pitch really creates a framework that allows you to place the right components in the right place, rather than having to sort of cobble something together at the end. We're briefly going to talk about NEMIC. New England Medical Innovation Center, Lydia and I set up about 3 years ago, to address a knowledge gap that we had seen in our careers in the industry, which was that there were lots of folk with great concepts in the med tech field, but because it's a complex and regulated industry, a lot of times they didn't know what they didn't know. That caused them, in some cases, to run into significant issues, in other cases to raise money, fail to raise money, or spend money on the wrong things. So we're a non-profit, and we engage. We will talk to absolutely everybody for half an hour. And then have relationships now with multiple companies all over New England, all over the globe, and who are going through the process of bringing their technologies to market. We are based here in Providence. We have a soft landing space. We have a tremendous education program, which we encourage you to take a look at. We've researched it very, very heavily, and it's really the sort of core component of this, of what we do. We've also got advisory services, a tremendous network of folk, mostly based in southern New England, and then we will do we have global events, seminars. At the end of it, what we try to focus on, success for us, is that your company gets funded and starts a process of taking that technology market. This is our team. Al has just joined us. Joey Goo's been with us out of the medical school for the last 3 years. May is the program director, and Lydia and I are managing partners. But outside of that, we've got a significant network. Briefly about me, this is all sort of the weird brag session part, but I've started a lot of companies. Most of them have done all right. Came out of RISD in industrial design, and sort of grew up through the industry in ways, doing essentially in the innovation business, and that eventually led me to founding Zymedica, which we were fortunate to sell first time about 6 years ago, and then we sold it again about 6 months ago. And from there, we went into, Lydia and I started the Innovation Center. Lydia?
I'm an angel investor and serial entrepreneur. And what I bring to our cohorts, our members, is my expertise and special knowledge in investment, capital raising, and developing business strategy.
That was a very modest presentation by Lydia. Okay, so what is a pitching deck? And it used to be that people wrote lengthy business plans, but as everybody online knows these days, nobody sort of reads. Very few people read significantly these days, and the pitch deck has sort of become the place that captures all the components of your proposed solution. So it holds data, it organizes the information into a meaningful narrative that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It talks about things that you know that you don't know, and essentially is there to make a case for investment. And obviously, at different times in a company's progress, the components of that business plan will change. And so we're going to focus today on essentially very, very early stage concepts, but we would encourage those same components are relevant, but in a truncated form at this point. Obviously, we work with an awful lot of folk in the business arena, and probably read 3 to 5 plans a week. They would normally have all these different components. In a hackathon, it is unrealistic that you're going to have all of these, and so the 3 that are in orange are really where we're going to focus today, and that is the idea of sort of where a venture was conceived, what are the problems or opportunities that you're looking to take, what's your knowledge of the market, is there a financial, what is the value proposition, etc., etc. The other stuff we've just left there, so that we are clear that this is not a full proposal, but it also essentially is saying, if you stay within these categories in those red section, you should have a fairly powerful and fairly cogent pitch. And Lydia, obviously, jump in at any point.
Yes, if I can also add, the pitch deck is also another form of strategic documents. In old days, investors, when they're asking for strategic documents, the company produces 15 to 20 Word documents, but you no longer need to do that. So pitch deck, if you see all the standard format that we set up here, is exactly following the key component of your business strategic planning, what you need to think about in advance. So.
All right. So, and just to acknowledge, there are different kinds of pitches. And when we're working with companies at NEMIC, we typically are going to see all of them, and we will require all of them. And so, the components that we typically see would be full decks, executive summaries. We've got a very nice template for that if anybody's interested. And the pitching formats are usually, there are typically 3. One is the classic sort of elevator pitch, and what is important with elevator pitches is that you imagine get in in an elevator with somebody who is rich and influential, and he says, well, or she says, well, what have you been up to lately? And you get 5 floors to explain what it is and why it's relevant, in the hope that maybe they say, oh, tell me more. And what's valuable with the 1 minute pitches is that they really force you to concentrate down. Today, I think we're focused on much shorter ones, and then the big 15-20 minute pitches are really going to go a great deal deeper. So I'm now going to just take you through what we would expect to see, and I'll start this by saying that typically the making the narrative very typical and similar to other narratives makes it easy for your investors or your judges to essentially line up the components. So we use a fairly, I'm not going to say rigid, but we use a formalized structure, because it's actually making it easy for the listener to navigate. And if you bounce around too much, and we have seen this 100 times, then you can lose people, and we do not want to you to lose people. So the introduction, the first slide is usually just is essentially your name, a logo, a tagline that sort of captures what you're trying to do, and at a very high level, something that sort of captures the idea of the opportunity or the solution. Sometimes there is an executive slide, and this really is going to line up the listener for everything that they are going to hear. And there's an important concept here that I'm going to sort of bring up, which is the idea of getting your listener to lean in. And it was interesting on just again in recent history, Lydia and I listened to 2 pitches on Thursday night, and they were both they were both for very smart technologies, but one, there was a text that came in that said, "I'm dozing off," and it was from one of the judges. And so the way, the energy and the way that you pose that first slide is really one that says, this is important, it's interesting, there's something going to be, you the listener are going to be interested coming in here.
And also this slide is a basis for your elevator speech, which is really important, because anytime you really have an opportunity, when people ask, what do you do? It's not about you personally, it's just about what your ideas and venture, and so it's having exact summary will help you to sort of organizing your thoughts and how you're going to talk to people to introduce.
Yeah. So the firstly, it is usually it's almost always, well, what's the problem here? What's happening? And sometimes this is told in an empathetic story and about an experience or somebody you know or something like that. But essentially, you're sort of setting the stage for everybody that you are talking to come in line, to hopefully nod and say, "Oh, I get it. I understand. That is a big problem," and that can have different components to it. They could be clinical. They might be clinical. They may have metrics attached to them. X number of people have X happen to them, etc. It may talk about how the market has failed to come up with a solution, but this is the grounding. This is the grounding moment of saying, okay, this is something serious. And the end of that slide should have folk going, okay, I get it, I understand, I'm interested in going to the next slide. And the next slide is a solution. And I'm going to differentiate here between a solution and a technology. The solution oftentimes has a technology somewhere down the road, but it is not a technology. The solution is usually a broader description of product, system, services that will solve the problem. And again, if you are all listening and imagining that you're going from a high position of, I understand the gravity of the problem, I see the opportunity, and I see that you've as a whole got a potential solution for this, that is all you need to do. And one of the things that as you've folk tomorrow and today are going through the development process, these slides, particularly this one, is where you want to come back, and it grounds you in usually a broader solution. So there is sometimes a tendency to rush to coding or to rush to make something and get your hot glue guns out and so forth. We would suggest that this is really the slide that you work hard against the problem area and build the opportunity. The next, and so this is the next is oftentimes, well, what's the value of that? So oftentimes you see a problem, and you see you're introduced to a potential solution, but I'm going to say every case in the medical and healthcare field, there has to be a value. And that value doesn't necessarily need to be money, but one way or another, that your solution needs to provide value to the system. It could be that somebody leaves a hospital earlier. It could be that people don't go and do foolish things like I just did this morning, and have a way of sort of beeping me if for some reason I think it's a really good idea to go and get an inflatable dinghy and go out to sea, having just had my hip operated on. So the value slide is, think very long and hard about the value slide. And in the course, the education course, I think it is the second lecture it's a workshop actually, is on value proposition. And there's a lot of different ways to create value in the system, and understanding those and being able to articulate them grounds the solution. If you're going to investors, they're going to want to hear this very early on. If you're going into a grant situation, again, it needs to be thought of very early. Lydia, would you like to expand on this?
Yeah, particularly as you mentioned, in the healthcare sector and the device sector, is really value to who are the really value stakeholders. Is the patients driven? Is that for the healthcare system to improve efficiency or cost reduction? So the value proposition and understanding value stakeholders is really important. But just always start with what's in for patients, what is the patient outcome. So that's.
All right. So, and I'm just going to flick one slide there. How does it work? And so this is when you're in the digital field in particular, or you're looking at connected solutions, it's very different from, you know, orthopedics or something like that. And typically there is a system that is coming into play that you're going to explain what those components are. The beauty of the connected devices and digital health and so forth is that many of the components are already in place, and how and where they are used and what components already exist means that the storytelling here is actually, it's not necessarily hard to execute, but the storytelling is one that involves interfaces. It brings components together, how information, what information is moved where, and so forth. And so this can be directly technology, but often it is system, I'm going to call it system architecture or ecosystem development. And the stakeholders, which we're going to talk about next, become heavily involved in this. And so in any aspect of the healthcare industry in particular, and this is one of the reasons, frankly, that we find it so interesting to work in, is the healthcare system is a tremendously human system. There are patients, and there are members, and there are caregivers, there are nurses and physicians and hospital systems and purchasers and so forth. And so from a development point of view, as you are identifying your solution and building your solution, an awful lot of the best solutions, the ones that go furthest, are often the ones that create the most poetry and the lowest friction between the different users. So I would encourage that you take your team and you really sort of, as you think about it from the perspective of who we got in the mix here and how can we make their I'm not going to say life, I'm going to say their impact in this solution. How can you enhance it and so forth? Where will it be used and so forth? So thinking about the users is critical. The central users, the secondary, etc. And no, I'm not going to say that. A matrix. Is what you're doing original? Probably not. There is probably something that has many components of your solution in it, but that does not for 1 second mean that you cannot put together and articulate a solution that addresses the problem in a different and more impactful way, or that it takes a slice of, in this case, the opioid crisis, and it addresses it in a very specific way. And so being acknowledging that there is almost never a situation where there are not other solutions in place. But this is also becomes, again, this is a slide where the innovators are going to look at the competition. They're going to look at what's out there, and they're going to say, you know what, it does this well, we can do that better. Here is how the market has changed. Maybe this is how technology can be addressed differently. And so the ability to understand who else is out there is actually a very strong development tool, because this is where you can also carve and build your solution to be stronger and investors and judges are going to want to know that you've got a broader picture, and so use this not as a static slide, but as a part of the development process. And this just goes back to sort of repeat myself, is if you've got these 8 to 11 slides in place, work them and be fully use them as a tool to make your solution better. So market opportunity and impact is really the one that is and it's importantly different from value, because this really becomes how this can be any components of how many users out there, what's going on in the market, what are the trends in the market, are there opportunities to what are the opportunities to create a revenue stream? Is this solution that you're coming up one that the healthcare, an insurance company would pay for? Is this an out-of-pocket expense? We have at NEMIC right now, we've got a number of solutions, and ultimately we would like those to be reimbursed by the healthcare and by the insurance industry. But realistically, every time that the companies have gone out to the market, in this case addressing very specific segments, parents in particular will say, yes, I will happily pay out of pocket for this right now, because I'm so in need of, or we're so in need of a solution. So the market opportunity and the impact on the market is something to develop out. And I believe that we are online tomorrow, and these are the sort of slides that if anybody wants to sort of chat and pressure test what they're doing and build on it, I'll say that the Lydia, Al, and Aidan team are quite good at sort of that activity. And then finally, you're kind of leaving is your statement to say, this is what we're doing, this is who we are. Having some credentials in there is valuable, and open it up to questions. So this is not as you can tell, this is not a long presentation. I don't think you should probably be going over certainly 15 slides would be a lot. But these are the components that we would typically expect. And then my final, I just making sure that's the final, near final. People invest in people, and in the business class that I teach, I've always used this chap. I've forgotten his name. He's not the world's best individual, probably, but in terms of somebody who can sell a piece of foam cloth and tell you everything that can be done with it and all the problems it will solve in your life that you never actually knew you had, and do it in a way that is wildly dynamic. The ShamWow, just to when you've got a light moment as a team, look at the ShamWow ad. It is one of the most compact presentations that I've ever seen. And the level to which he uses, and I'd love to really break it down one day, he uses so many different components to make what he's selling, which is a piece of foam cut into a square, the right thing to buy, is just extraordinary. And so think of that sort of attitude, the confidence that you can bring, how you would talk knowledgeably about something that you've, in some cases, have literally invented in the last 2 days, and so forth, is just, he shows a good lesson, because ultimately it is amazing the dynamic nature of a human being connecting with another human being over a compelling solution to a known problem, an awful lot of it ultimately is going to come down to that relationship. Okay, so finally, just to bring this together, what's the problem you're addressing? What's the solution you're proposing? And how will the solution benefit the key stakeholders?
So if I can just add a little bit, we can show you all the contents, how to write, and how to fill up all the form. It's important, but keep that in mind. It's important to think about your audience. So your pitching deck is for investors, or is that because you can use this pitching deck to have a conversation with your co-founders who are looking for partners or investors or vendors. So just be flexible as who your audience is, so you can be, to design and customize your pitching deck. Also going back to first problem statements, if you want to talk to investor and if you are taking time to, creating venture, your problem has to be disruptive, not just incremental. That's really setting the tone, because at the end of the day, your problem has to be huge and big, and your solution has to be very creative. And but at the end, your total market opportunity has to be $1 billion. So think big. That's another sort of checkpoint to evaluating your business ideas, if I can at that point. This was a great presentation, Aidan.
Yes. So we have a plug at the end of this, which is for the leadership program that we run each year. It's been extremely well received. We have multiple companies have been born out of this. We've run it now for, I think, 2 years. This is the 3rd year. And if you either have something that is in play that you want to bring forward, then creates a very, very strong framework that goes way, 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 way deeper. And it truly goes into the regulated sides of the industry. But have a look at it and so forth. It's a good course. I think we are going to open this up to questions, and we are always happy to answer absolutely anything, including did I actually get the fish in? Could be one question.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. We do have a question in the Q&A, and please, if you do have questions for the team, feel free to post them in the Q&A session on your screen. And we have a question from Brendan Jacka from Brown, who's asking, if I'm a researcher based at a college, would we need to create a company before contacting you at NEMIC?
The short answer is no. We've been working with a number of researchers at Brown, and really the trigger. I'll let Lydia leap in on this, but there are definitely trigger points such as writing an SBIR. The patents don't require you to have a company. SBIRs do. Investment does, and we've been working with a number of folk from Brown for years. One of them is just converting right now and launching his company that he's been working on the solution, I think, for a couple of years. Lydia, do you want to build on that?
Absolutely. So for those of you who have lab innovations, our job is really evaluating innovation and what path it will make sense through analysis, whether it needs to take a venture, whereas I mentioned that, the market sizes, the opportunity is really big enough. There's a really huge value proposition in the healthcare space. But sometimes your innovation may stay within the research area, and we can help you to determine what sort of grant funding or funding source to develop your research can be developed. So it doesn't have to be creating a company, and nor we encourage to set up the company before you have a really clear understanding that you will take on to venture space pathway.
Yeah, I'll just add on that a little bit, which is to say that be cautious when we require an NDA. We essentially, anybody we're going to talk to, for their protection and for ours, we'd like to have an NDA in place right away, and that is mostly in industry. IP is important. And so we want to make sure that there is a sort of consciousness about that IP right away.
Great, thank you. And I guess maybe as a follow-up question to this wonderful one coming from a university-based researcher, what if your community organization, what are some of those, is the same idea, like can a community organization or a group of individuals who aren't necessarily affiliated still access the services and supports of NEMIC, and what would you advise them? So they may not have a business endpoint as their goal.
Well, I'm going to say that there is always a business, an underlying business component. And so, and we've been working extensively in the vaccination market. We've in the vaccination field, in communities, hit communities, in Rhode Island, for instance. We've been working in Central Falls since the beginning of the year. We helped a chap called Eugenio Fernandez. Dr. Eugenio Fernandez set up vaccination clinics in Central Falls. We then helped him extend all over some harder hit communities in Rhode Island. We have some other things we're doing on areas such as social equity. That in all cases, the components of business are living there. Who you're going to hire, how you're going to pay for them, how you're going to make this sustainable, and so forth. And so we are very, very interested, and in helping this area as a whole, because in our careers we've worked in it previously in other ways, but I think that it is largely the same. Lydia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, particularly I think NEMIC is really focusing on healthcare service issues on the represented community, and so it's just really finding the solution overall in community development through how to outreach the patients or the community, or how does agency can improve their efficiency. Or so, I mean, we're looking at everything is from business perspective. It doesn't have to be just a venture. I'm setting up the venture, we're getting investments, but overall, how do you improve healthcare systems? So absolutely, we'd be very happy to work with anybody. So just contact us.
Totally, and there are some very good grants around, and we actually, if anybody's interested, we have one that'll be coming into play. I mean, not everything there are. If there are lots of different types of businesses, not all best businesses are investment, but are should ever be for the investment market. They're not going to be the next Google or something. But solutions are still are required, and they have to understand how they're going to be sustainable and impactful over a longer time. And I think in a way it's an interesting area to talk about, because the need in some of those markets and is really, really high, but you're going about it in a different way.
Does it answer the question, Tracy?
I think it does. And Brendan, please feel free to jump in with any follow-up questions. But no, I think that's it's extremely helpful to hear the breadth and depth of the support that's available, and also the perspective, really, that there's many of these are ideas and pitches, and understanding is very relevant to an academic environment and a not-for-profit environment just as much as a for-profit environment in terms of these decisions. And I think the COBRE has benefited greatly from the thinking along these lines too. So very much so.
So as the panelists mentioned yesterday, this COBRE event is only the start of your idea. And if you all are interested in exploring our resources, I just shared 2 links, one to our email, or you can go onto our website and see what programs suit you. The MedTech Leadership Program that Aiden just shared is really built for a comprehensive view of building out a regulated medtech, which is perfect for when you have an idea, for example, after a hackathon event and you want to fully develop an idea like that. This is something that you can really utilize. And we will be in a booth tomorrow morning. If anyone has any questions about pitching, feel free to come in. Every team gets 10 minutes. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you very, very much to our friends at NEMIC, and we have the opportunity to we'll continue to see you throughout the weekend, and with other questions that come up, you can direct message the team. And we're going to end this session and allow us, please, we'd like to spend a little bit more time all together and having an opportunity to network and meet and set up questions and form teams. So our session, the next session is the team formation and the moment of hearing what people's ideas are. But we're going to actually try and set it up a little differently. We'll make an announcement as well on this, but we're actually going to add another half hour. So we'll open up the lounge. Please come to there's a table there for networking and hangout tables. There's also topic related tables, the policy and healthcare solution hacks and policy, community and healthcare solution hacks, as well as if you have your own table, or if you want your own table because you have a team. But please join any of those spots, and we'll be just literally hanging out there, talking and meeting, and we'll run that until 11:30, and then we'll start our team pitching and ideas out there. So sorry, not pitching for the project, but more your idea for a team and or the problem that you want to put forward. So thank you very much, and we will see you over in the lounge.